This lesson will teach me to define and recognize the midsegment of a triangle and apply the midsegment theorem. A midsegment is the segment connecting the midpoint of two sides of a triangle. In order to draw a midsegment, we have to know some pieces of information. We have to know where the midpoints of the triangle are. So for sake of drawing, we're going to go ahead and make some assumptions. I'm going to assume that these are the centers, the midpoints. For a problem, they'd have to be given to you. If it's a midpoint, then I can mark singles, doubles, and triples because a midpoint divides the side into two equal pieces. So the midsegment. The midsegment is going to connect any two of these. So there's one midsegment. I could also draw a midsegment here, and I could also draw a midsegment here. So how many midsegments can a triangle have? 3. Triangle midsegment theorem. If a segment joins the midpoints of two sides of a triangle, meaning if you have a midsegment, because that's all those are saying, if you have a midsegment, then the midsegment is parallel to the third side and half its length. So the green midsegment, this green midsegment here, is parallel and half the length to the one here. The blue is half the length and parallel to the third side over here. And the black one is half the length of this long black third side and is also parallel to it. In triangle DEF, A, B, and C are midpoints. Some markings that we can assume because of the word midpoint. We know that those can be marked as the same, these can be marked as the same, and these two down here can be marked as the same. All right, so list the midsegments. Segment AB, segment AC, and segment BC are midsegments because these segments connect the midpoints of two sides. Using the midsegment theorem, list the pairs of parallel sides. The pairs of parallel sides are the midsegments and their third side. So the red segment here, the blue and the blue, and the green and the green. Using the midsegment theorem, show the relationship between a midsegment and its third side. The midsegment is always half the length of the third side. So the small blue is half the length of the long blue, the small green is half the length of the long green, and this small red is half of the length of the long red, which is indicated by the markings below. Notice down here where it says AB equals half DF, there's no line segments on top because we're dealing with length. Lastly, listing all congruent segments. The congruent segments are already marked. They're marked because they told us that we had midpoints. I did singles, doubles, and triples, so those segments are listed below. DC, FC, yep, okay. In triangle EFG, H, J, and K are midpoints. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. Single, double, triple. Find HJ. Well, HJ is going to be here in red. So its third side that it has a relationship to is that one. HJ ends up equaling half of the longer side, which is EG. The diagram shows me that EG is 100, so HJ equals half of 100, which is 50. JK is this side length here, so it must correspond to this one over here. JK equals half the length of FE. FE equals 60, so JK equals half of 60, which is 30. A lot of you may not need to set up an equation to look at this, but I figured it couldn't hurt right now. And the other one, let's use green. FG is this long green side here, so HK is the one that goes with it. HK equals half the length of FG. Well, here what we know is HK So if HK is 40, how do we get FG by itself? Well, I can undo the half by multiplying both sides by 2. So that means that FG is 80. All right, go ahead and try the next one. In this problem, there weren't a whole lot of words, but because of the double marking and the single marking, I know that point E is a midpoint, and I know that point B is a midpoint. So that means that segment EB is a midsegment. Using the given information, it told me that AB was 10, so I marked AB. Knowing that that had the single marking, I also put 10 over here with the single marking, which gave me my BC. And then it told me that CD was 18, so I marked it. Knowing that EB is the mid segment, it's half the length of the third side, so half of 18 is 9. My little question down here, what do these markings indicate? They indicate midpoint, which is what I already mentioned. Find the value of angle VUZ. Explain using an if-then statement. All right, so look at what you have in the diagram. You have single markings, so V is a midpoint, double markings, so U is a midpoint, so UV is a midsegment. What do you know if you have a midsegment? If a segment is a midsegment, then it is parallel to the third side and half its length. I'm not going to use the half its length here because I don't have any lengths of these sides. What I do have though is the measurement of this angle. So we're going to go ahead and use parallel lines. Let me extend these for a little bit of a visual. VUZ is this one here. I see corresponding angles. And I know that if lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. So it must be 65. In triangle XYZ, MN and P are midpoints. Find the perimeter of triangle, the perimeter of triangle MNP is 60. Find the measure of NP and YZ. All right, so take a look at my answer for this problem. We know that the perimeter is the sum of all three sides. It has nothing to do with the angles, it's the length around the outside. So for this tiny triangle in the center, they gave us two sides of the triangle, but it didn't give us the length of the third side. So I set up the equation 60, which is the given perimeter, equals 24 plus 22 plus NP is that unknown side. Did a little bit of mental math, and I found out that NP was 14. Then it asked for the length of YZ. So YZ I colored in blue, and the third side, or its mid-segment that went with it, was MP. So now we're over here looking at these calculations in blue and red. NP is a mid-segment, so it's equal to half the length of its third side, which is YZ. So I plugged in the length they gave me. YZ has to be 44 because the long side is actually double the short. All right, two more. These ones require a little bit more algebra. So for the first one, notice we have the double markings, so there's a midpoint here, and the single markings, there's a midpoint here. We know that this red length is half the length of this third side here. So look at the equation. X minus 3 is going to equal half the length of the long side. It's a lot of fractions. What if we did it the other way? What if we said that the short side was twice the length of the long side? It works either way. Solve either one you want to. I have a feeling that for most of you, you have a little fraction phobia looking at the first. So let's go ahead and do the second. I'm going to distribute the 2. I gotta get this by itself over here. So -6 is going to equal -1.5 x, and that is multiplication, so if you want you can divide by that -1.5. You may, most likely, need your calculator here, and you end up with 4. So regardless of whether you say that the short side equals half the long or the double the short side is the long, you still will end up getting the same answer. All right, over here looking at this one. Double, so W must be a midpoint. Single, so V must be a midpoint. So segment VW is a midsegment. So segment NL is that longer side. I don't think this segment up here is going to help us at all. I think it's just distracting information. So we know that WV, oops, not YV, is equal to half the length of NL. Or if you want to look at it this way, we know that that shorter length is twice the other. Either way you want to look at it, I have a feeling most of you are going to like this option. So twice that shorter length, and you do need parentheses, it's not just 2x, it's 2 times x and 2 times 15, is going to equal that longer side. So 2x plus 30 equals x plus 21. If I subtract the x from both sides, if I subtract the 30 from both sides, let's see, minus 30, negative 7. Nope. Negative 9. All right, so some of you might freak out a little bit because you feel like I got a negative, x can't be a negative. Well, that's not a side length. It's telling you that the value of the variable is negative. So if x is a negative, negative 9 plus 15 means that this length is 6. X is a negative 9, then that means that this length is 12. 6 is half of 12. I'm sorry, 6 is twice 12, and 12 is half of 6. So either way, it still works out. Please let me know in class if you have any questions.